The Forgotten Path Presence. I built a survival tent using only vines and leaves. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to make a shelter out of whatever materials you had lying around? In today's video, I want to share with you a very unique experience I had in the jungle when I decided to build a survival tent using only vines and leaves. This is a true story that happened to me deep in the Amazon rainforest during a solo survival challenge. It was an incredible experience that pushed my limits both physically and mentally. Let's get started. The jungle was wet, thick, and unforgiving. Every branch dripped, every leaf whispered warnings, and yet I walked deeper. I had nothing with me. No rope, no tools, no help. Just one mission: to build a survival tent using only what the jungle offered, vines and leaves. The challenge wasn't just physical, it was mental. The sky hinted at rain, the air smelled of storm. Time was limited, and failure wasn't an option. I scanned the surroundings, looking for anything strong, flexible, and natural. That's when I spotted the perfect vine, twisted, alive and climbing like it owned the forest. I tugged gently. Strong, I pulled harder. It held. This would be my rope, my frame, my lifeline. But how to cut it without a blade? I used a sharp-edged stone and friction from another branch. Minutes turned to hours. But eventually I had enough vine-thick ones for structure and thin ones for weaving. Next came the leaves. I needed them big, water-resistant, and flexible. Banana and palm leaves became my best friends. But first, the ground had to be cleared. Wet mud doesn't hold shape well. So I gathered rocks, layered them for elevation, and used my hands to flatten the surface. With vines tied between two bent saplings, I created the base arch. It creaked, but held. Then the weaving began, interlocking vines like a net across the structure, slow and steady. Layering the leaves took patience. Every gap had to be closed. Every overlap mattered. One mistake and water would pour in like a stream. I pressed each leaf into place with care, secured them using tighter vines, and reinforced the edges with thick bark strips. By the time the clouds opened up, my hands were raw, my back sore, but the tent stood ready. I crawled inside, not knowing if it would hold. Raindrops tapped on the roof. One, then hundreds. The jungle roared with wind and thunder. I waited. Not a drop made it through. Inside that leaf and vine tent, I sat in silence. No tool had touched this structure, no blueprint. Just instinct, observation, and nature's gifts. I realized then shelter isn't about comfort, it's about connection. Learning how to use the jungle without hurting it. Taking only what you need and listening to the environment instead of fighting it. This build wasn't just survival, it was trust. Trust that nature always provides if you're willing to learn. Trust that simplicity often outlasts complexity, and trust in your hands, your patience, your will. When dawn broke, the tent still stood. Dry inside, strong outside. A reminder that even with nothing, we can create everything we need. We understand the land and respect its rhythm. The experience of creating a shelter out of vines and leaves in the Amazon rainforest was truly humbling. It was a reminder of the ingenuity and resourcefulness of the human spirit and the incredible bounty of the natural world. I learned that with a little creativity and know-how, you can find innovative solutions to even the toughest challenges. I also discovered the therapeutic and meditative qualities of working with natural materials and the satisfaction that comes from building something by hand. But perhaps most importantly, I gained a deeper appreciation for the power and resilience of the natural world and the importance of respecting and protecting it. If you enjoyed this story and would like to hear more about my adventures in the jungle, please don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also follow me on social media to see more of my work. Alright, now let's talk about the details of this amazing shelter. First off, I'll be honest, this thing wasn't exactly a mansion, but it was functional and got the job done. It may not have been pretty, but it kept me safe and dry during one of the worst storms I've experienced in the jungle. Now let's talk about the materials I used. As I mentioned earlier, I used only two types of materials for this build: vines and leaves. The vines were strong and flexible, which made them ideal for creating the frame of the shelter. Also used them to weave a net-like structure that added stability to the walls and roof of the shelter. The leaves were large and water-resistant, making them perfect for creating a waterproof barrier. I used a combination of banana and palm leaves for this purpose. Let's get into the construction process. The first step was to create the frame of the shelter using the vines. I bent some of the larger vines into arches and placed them in a row to form the base of the shelter. Then I used smaller vines to create a lattice-like structure between the arches. This created a sturdy base for the shelter that could withstand the weight of the leaves and the pressure of the rain. Next, I started to weave the vines together using a simple overhand knot. This created a tight interlocking net that would help keep the structure stable and secure. I continued weaving until I had covered the entire frame with vines. Once the frame was complete, it was time to add the leaves. I started by laying down a layer of banana leaves, which are large and flexible. I overlapped the leaves to create a watertight seal and used smaller vines to secure them in place. I then added a second layer of leaves using palm leaves, which are more water-resistant than banana leaves. Again, I overlapped the leaves and secured them with vines. To reinforce the shelter, I added a border of thick vines around the edges and used bark strips to reinforce the corners. This helped to stabilize the structure and protect it from wind and rain. In total, it took me several hours to build this shelter, but it was well worth the effort. The materials were readily available in the jungle, and the construction techniques were simple enough to be replicated with basic tools. One of the things I loved about building this shelter was the sense of satisfaction and accomplishment that came from creating something by hand using natural materials. It was also a great opportunity to connect with the natural world and appreciate the beauty and abundance of the jungle. If you're interested in learning more about wilderness survival skills, please check out my other videos and courses. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and happy surviving.